Imagine a warrior so powerful he could single-handedly stop entire armies, yet whose greatest strength would become his greatest weakness. This is the story of Ajax of Salamis, the only Greek hero who never needed the gods' help to win his battles, but who was defeated by the one thing he could not fight: his own honor. On a small island near Athens, a son was born to Telamon, king of Salamis, who would be given a prophetic name. When Heracles visited the royal palace and saw an eagle perching on Telamon's shoulder, he prophesied the birth of a hero whose name would come from the very bird Ajax, which in ancient Greek means of the earth, but also evokes the eagle's cry. This would not be an ordinary hero, for his destiny was intertwined with Zeus himself through his divine lineage. Ajax grew up as a giant among men. His stature was so impressive that soldiers compared him to a living stone tower. From childhood, he demonstrated strength that defied any natural explanation. He could lift stones that three men together could not move, and his voice echoed through the mountains like a lion's roar. But what impressed most was not just his physical strength, but his unshakable moral integrity. When he reached the age for heroic training, Ajax was sent to Mount Pelion to study with Chiron, the wisest of centaurs. There, alongside his cousin Achilles, he learned not only the arts of war, but also medicine, philosophy, and music. Chiron recognized something unique in Ajax. While other heroes depended on tricks, magic, or divine favor, Ajax relied exclusively on his own strength and determination. He was a purist of heroism who believed that true greatness came from human effort, not from gifts of the gods. This philosophy was reflected in his battle equipment. Ajax forged for himself a monumental shield made of 7 layers of bull leather and an eighth of bronze. The shield was so large it seemed like a walking wall. His spear was the size of a ship's mast, and only he had strength enough to wield it. Differently from other heroes who used divine armor or magical weapons, every piece of Ajax's equipment was the result of human work and mortal technique. When Agamemnon's messengers arrived in Salamis summoning warriors for the expedition against Troy, Ajax did not hesitate. He went not merely for Tyndareus's oath or personal glory. For him, the war represented the ultimate test of his principles, to demonstrate that pure human virtue could triumph over any adversity. He equipped 12 ships with Salamis's finest warriors and sailed to Aulis, where he joined the rest of the Greek coalition. In the Greek camp, Ajax quickly established himself as a unique figure. While other commanders schemed politically or sought divine favors, Ajax maintained brutal transparency in all his actions. He said exactly what he thought, kept all his promises, and never retreated from a fair fight. This made him extremely popular among common soldiers, who saw in him a genuinely trustworthy leader. His tent was always open to any warrior who needed advice or help. During the 10 years of siege at Troy, Ajax became the pillar of Greek defense. His specialty was not lightning attack like Achilles, nor strategy like Odysseus, but absolute resistance. When the Trojans attacked the camp, Ajax organized the defense with impressive military efficiency. He positioned himself always at the most dangerous points, using his gigantic shield to protect not only himself, but dozens of soldiers around him. Ajax's most epic confrontation occurred during a formal duel with Hector, Troy's principal defender. The two warriors respected each other mutually, as examples of the traditional heroic ideal. They fought from dawn to dusk, in combat that shook the very battlefield. Ajax managed to wound Hector with his spear, and nearly knocked him out with a gigantic stone, but Hector resisted with supernatural tenacity. When the heralds declared a draw at sunset, the two warriors greeted each other as brothers in arms and exchanged gifts. Ajax gave Hector an ornate belt, and Hector presented Ajax with a magnificently forged sword. Neither imagined how these gifts would become symbols of their tragic destinies. The war's most severe crisis came when Achilles withdrew from combat because of his dispute with Agamemnon. With the greatest Greek warrior out of action, the responsibility of keeping the coalition united fell upon Ajax. He accepted this burden without complaint, though he knew he did not possess his cousin's supernatural speed or invulnerability. For weeks, Ajax led desperate attacks against the Trojan walls and organized heroic defenses when the Trojans counterattacked. The most desperate moment came when Hector led a massive attack that pushed the Greeks back to their own ships. While other heroes considered evacuating by sea, Ajax planted himself firmly on the beach and declared he would rather die than allow the Trojans to burn the fleet. For hours he fought alone against waves of attackers, his shield reflecting hundreds of spears and his voice shouting orders that kept the Greeks organized. His desperate resistance lasted long enough for Patroclus to convince Achilles to send the Myrmidons back into combat. When Achilles finally died, struck by Paris's arrow, Ajax performed the most heroic act of the entire war. While the Trojans rushed to capture the great hero's body, Ajax protected it with a ferocity that astonished both armies. Fighting alone against crowds of enemies, he covered Achilles' body with his gigantic shield while Odysseus organized the retreat. It was Ajax who carried Achilles' body on his shoulders across the battlefield, defying any Trojan who tried to stop him. This heroic action planted in Ajax the natural expectation that he would be rewarded with Achilles' divine weapons. For a warrior who had dedicated his entire life to ideals of honor and merit, this seemed like an obvious and just reward. Ajax had been the second-best Greek warrior throughout the entire war, had saved countless comrades' lives, and had just recovered the body of the expedition's most important hero. In his simple and direct mind, there was no doubt about who deserved to inherit the equipment forged by Hephaestus. When it was announced that there would be a formal competition to decide the fate of the weapons, Ajax was surprised but not worried. Ajax was surprised the weapons, but Ajax believed his combat achievements would speak for themselves. During the trial, Ajax presented a direct account of his military conquests, how many enemies he had defeated, how many times he had saved the camp, how he had protected Achilles' body. His argument was simple, honest, and based on concrete facts. Ajax, in turn, used all his eloquence to emphasize his intellectual contributions to the war. He spoke about his diplomatic missions, his military strategies, and crucially about the idea of the Trojan horse that would finally conquer the city. The Greek commanders, after long deliberation, decided that Odysseus's strategic contributions were more valuable than Ajax's brute force. The weapons were given to the king of Ithaca. For Ajax, this decision was a collapse of everything he believed in. His entire life had been built on the premise that valor, loyalty, and sacrifice would be recognized and rewarded. Now he discovered that politics and rhetoric were more important than spilled blood and saved lives. It was not just a personal defeat, it was proof that his fundamental values were obsolete in a world that prioritized cunning over honor. During the night, consumed by a fury he had never experienced, Ajax decided to avenge himself on Odysseus, Agamemnon, and Menelaus. He took his weapons and headed to the commanders' tents with the intention of killing them while they slept. But Athena, protecting Odysseus, sent divine madness upon Ajax. In his altered state, Ajax confused the camp's cattle herd with his human enemies and massacred dozens of animals, believing he was executing his revenge. When the madness dissipated at dawn and Ajax understood what he had really done, his humiliation became complete. Not only had he been denied the honor he deserved, but now he had become an object of ridicule throughout the Greek coalition. The same men he had protected for 10 years now laughed at his madness and whispered about his mental degradation. For a warrior whose identity was based entirely on respect and dignity, this situation was literally worse than death. Ajax retreated to an isolated beach, where he planted in the sand the sword that Hector had given him as a gift. The irony did not escape him. He would be killed by the weapon of his most respectable enemy, in contrast to the betrayal of his supposed allies. Without pronouncing words of farewell or seeking reconciliation, Ajax threw himself upon the blade, choosing an honorable death over a life stained by shame. His suicide sent shockwaves through the Greek camp. Even those who had supported Odysseus recognized that something precious had been lost. Ajax represented the purest heroic ideals of Greek tradition, and his death symbolized the end of an era when simple and direct virtue still had supreme value. Ajaxes, despite their rivalry, argued that Ajax deserved a complete funeral with all military honors. Thus died Ajax of Salamis, the last of the traditional heroes. His tragedy was not caused by hubris against the gods or personal moral flaws, but by his inability to adapt to a changing world. He was a man of absolute principles living in an era of growing moral relativism. His story remains as a powerful reminder that even the greatest virtues can become fatal vulnerabilities when the world around us changes faster than our capacity for adaptation. Ajax proved that true strength lies not only in muscles or courage, but in the flexibility of spirit to survive in a universe that does not always reward those who most deserve it. Long break.